What's up, guys? I'm back. It's Russo again. Fourth time today. Did 2 videos with Jordy over on the Backdoor Fantasy Sports channel, and I am going to be diving into a little bit more NFL here. We're going to be talking about Saturday, the NFL slate for January 18th, where the playoffs just continue. We've got 2 killer games. We've got the Commanders versus the Lions, and we've got the Chiefs versus the Texans. So I put together a 6-man here that I'm going to break down. Some of these plays are also featured in the Backdoor Fantasy Sports video, but I'm putting together a 6-man, so I just wanted to show you guys what I'm getting into for this first big slip. And make sure you're subscribed, because I'm going to put together a demon slip as well if you guys like those YOLO plays. I'll share that in the community section of my channel, so make sure you're subscribed. You get notified when I drop that demon slip later, and I'll put the tail, the link to tail it if you guys want to. But these are the plays I'm going to be getting into. I'm going Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm just taking the fantasy score over 19 for this slip. Running back for the Lions. I like Terry McLaurin, wide receiver for the Commanders. I like him over 14.5 fantasy score. Xavier Worthy, I'm taking that fantasy score as well, 11.5 wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs. We're going Jameson Williams, 4 receptions. Love this one for more. This will definitely be probably one of the demons I put in the video, or the slip later. But yeah, wide receiver for the Lions. And then Dalton Schultz, tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. I like him. I'm sorry, not the Chiefs. He's playing against the Chiefs. He's plays for the Texans. I like him to go over 8.5 fantasy score. I think he's going to be honestly the softest matchup against that defense. And then my last play here is going to be Dyami Brown, wide receiver for the Commanders, over 7.5 fantasy score. So going with literally all fantasy score except for Jameson Williams. I like his receptions at 4. I love that play, so I threw that into this as well. So buckle up. I got 6 plays to break down. I'll try to get through it as quickly as I can. So we talked about this on the Backdoor Fantasy Sports channel. Jameson Williams, I just love this play. The receptions, Outlier has this as an EV plus play. There's expected value here. You can see he's gone for at least 4 in 7 out of his last 8 games, and 6 out of his last 7 he's gone for over 4, gone for 5 or more. The matchup is tough, 9th in receptions allowed to wide receivers, but there's just going to be too much for Washington to keep up with, and he's been such a steady part of what they're doing. Literally, out of those 8 games, the last 8 games, the only one he missed, one more reception would have gotten him to at least 4, which would be a push. But I think he's good for at least, I think he's going to be going for at least 5. That last game against Minnesota, he had 6 receptions. He's just too fast, and he's really emerged this year as one of their top weapons. So yeah, I like him to get this done. Not too much to break down here. Let's see. Let's take a look at this note from Outlier. Okay, yeah. So they're saying he's exceeded 2.5 receptions. That must be like a goblin that they're recognizing on Prize Picks or something. But he's done that in 9 straight games. So he's averaging 4.6 receptions a game over the last 9 games. So that's clearly over the 4 that we need, which I think he's getting at least 5, maybe 6 in this. Let's take a look at daily grind for this play. They like his longest reception over 23.5 at 50.96% odds to hit the over minus 122. They actually have this favored to the under, 50.02% odds to hit the under. I think it's just because the odds keep changing and this thing's just crunching numbers. I just refreshed it. Yeah, earlier it was showing this favor to go over. I think he's good for it. You guys don't have to take it if you'd rather. They like his receiving yards over 50.5. They have that at a 50.63% odds to hit the over. I'm keeping the receptions. They like this longest reception to over 23.5, which I think makes sense because he's a deep threat. He'll probably catch at least one that's pretty far, but I'd rather just take the whole thing. I also do like the fantasy score over 12, so you could take that if you prefer. I think there's a good chance he gets in the end zone. I believe he has 4 touchdowns in the last 4 games. Last game he didn't get any touchdowns, but he had 2 in the game before that, if I'm not mistaken. So I think the fantasy score looks great at 12, but I'm just going to take those receptions over 4 to get us started here. So Xavier Worthy, I love this play. He's become such a big part of what they're doing. Totally took over as the wide receiver one for this team. He's just too fast. He's literally the fastest guy in the NFL. He has the fastest recorded combine 40 time of all time. I believe it was a 4.18, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe a 4.21. It was ridiculous, but he's definitely the fastest. And, when you've got a guy like this who can get open so quickly and has good hands, and then you've got someone like Patrick Mahomes throwing him the ball, it just doesn't really matter who you're matched up against. I mean, he's going to probably be matched up with Derek Stingley Jr., who's really tough. I mean, one of the best corners in the league, in my opinion. But I still think that he's just too fast for even someone like Derek Stingley. So his receptions, excuse me, this last game against Denver, he didn't even play. So that was when they rested all their starters. It was a 38-0 blowout by Denver, but it was just kind of a meaningless situation. So yeah, if we take a look at the matchup, tough matchup because Houston is tough. 8th in receptions allowed to wide receivers. But you can see this last game against Pittsburgh, he had 8 receptions. And then last time he played Houston, he had 7 receptions. So the receptions might be something that catch your eye. But he also has had a nose for the end zone lately. So again, he didn't play this game. And then he has 3 straight games with a touchdown, including last time he matched up against Houston. So I'm loving this fantasy score overall. He should definitely be able to get this done. He gets involved in rushing. He has a really low rushing yards line at like 4.5, I believe. You could take that if you're interested. But I'm just going to take the fantasy score. 3 straight games with 19.6 or more. We're getting at 11.5. It's ridiculous. Let's take a look at the over-under before we keep going here. We'll talk about what this game should look like. Asking my computer to do a lot, so forgive me if it takes a minute to load. But I'm really excited about football on Saturday. So we have a 41.5 point over under. Chiefs favored by 8.5 playing in Kansas City. So yeah, I think that this should be solid. I feel good about this play, and I think regardless of whether or not we run into any weather, I would imagine that he's going to get his. And like I said, they get him rushing the ball too. Let me just pull up the weather report real fast for Kansas City. Don't want to take forever on this video, but we want to get you guys the best information possible. So we'll go daily. We'll look at Sunday. It's supposed to be cold, obviously. 24 degrees feels like 12. Moderate humidity, 2% precipitation, so really, really low chance of rain. Supposed to be just partly cloudy with 14 mile an hour winds northbound. So not really anything concerning. I think that he's going to be heavily involved and he'll get his. So let's see what Daily Grind thinks. They love the fantasy score. That's the best play on the board according to the DFS optimizer. 52.24% odds to hit the over. I just think this is way too low. 12.7 is what FanDuel's given it to us at. And we're getting all the way down at 11.5. The receptions are set at 5. They don't like that. I still think he's good for it, but they love the rushing and receiving yards combo. I think that looks great too. That might be in the demon slip later if they've got a demon for his rushing and receiving combined. Might go receptions, might just go receiving yards, but they like all of this. The rushing receiving yards is a 51.52% odds to hit the over. They like the rushing yards over 4.5. They like the receiving yards over 51.5. Yeah, just about everything of his is looking good. They just think the receptions are a little too pricey at 5 when you can get it at 4.5 on other platforms. So let's keep moving. All right, Dalton Schultz. This is one of my favorite plays. You can see here last time he matched up against them, which wasn't that long ago. That was just on December 21st, 2024. He had 5 receptions. It's hard to do much against Kansas City, but there is a major soft spot here at the tight end position. If we take a look for receptions, like overall, they're actually not bad. 22nd in receptions allowed, and then an even softer spot against tight ends, 29th. And then he also got into the end zone last time they played. If we take a look at the touchdowns matchup, maybe he didn't. I think I'm getting confused with another play. Let me see here. Oh, that's on touchdowns specifically. Are we sure? What am I looking at here? Let's go to fantasy score. Yeah, Did he not get into the end zone? Was that first quarter touchdowns I was on, maybe? Yeah, he got into the end zone last time they played. And the matchup, let's see, 5th overall in touchdowns allowed, and then 10th to tight end. So a little bit softer there for tight end. So I think that he's going to be kind of the security blanket for CJ Stroud. Again, the receptions, solid matchup, 29th in receptions allowed. He had 5. And you can see, like, when you see a situation like this where he's getting 2 or 3 any given week and then he pops off for 5, it's because they're doing a good job guarding the other guys. I think it's going to be a tough day for Joe Mixon. We'll see. He's a super talented running back, but I think it's going to be a tough day for him. And I think that they're going to be all over Nico Collins. And then besides that, I mean, who's really... I mean, they just let Deontay Johnson go. I don't know what's going on with that dude, but yeah. So I think Dalton Schultz is going to have to be relied upon for CJ Stroud, and I love this matchup. 29th in receptions allowed. Let's real quick look at the receiving yards matchup. 32nd, so bottom of the league in receptions allowed. He went for 45. Receiving yards allowed. He went for 45 last time they matched up. And let's take a look here. So yeah, they're a little bit tougher. 16th overall on receiving yards, and then bottom of the barrel, 32nd to tight ends. So I feel good about it. Let's take a look here at Daily Grind. They love the fantasy score over 8.5 as well. I just figure if you're looking at the receiving yards, I believe they were set at like 39.5, and then the receptions are at 4. So if he's going to cash the receiving yards and the receptions, he's going to get that fantasy score because it's full point PPR. But if he happens to not have, as good of a day with receptions and receiving yards, but he gets into the end zone, we're still good to go on the fantasy score. So I'm just going to take a little bit of everything and go fantasy score. Let's keep it moving. Jahmyr Gibbs. My gosh, that last game against Minnesota in such an important game, unbelievable. 46 fantasy score, got into the end zone 4 times. We do, I'm hearing we do have David Montgomery back. Let's see if we can get a little update here. If he's like completely healthy or they ease him back in. He's completely off the injury report, so hopefully he's good to go. That would be great if he can finish out this season with them. But I think that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a big part of what they're doing regardless. That might actually just keep him fresher. So we'll dive into this matchup a little bit more. So let's look at rushing and receiving yards, since he is capable of doing both really well. 30th in rushing yards allowed, 4th in receiving yards allowed. Let's take a look specifically to running backs. Similar. So 29th in rushing yards allowed, 1st in receiving yards allowed. So it's hard to pass to your running backs against Washington. But we know that this is going to be a super high scoring game with the way both of these offenses and defenses are designed. 55.5 point over under. So they're expecting a lot of scoring in this game. Playing in Detroit, 9.5 point favorite to the Lions. So yeah, I think he and Montgomery should both get plenty of work. But as far as the touchdowns go, I mean, like, his touchdown is a goblin on Prize Picks, so they're totally expecting at least one, which makes sense when you look at his touchdown history here. Yeah, I mean, 8 out of his last 10 games, he got into the end zone. 2 of those, he got 2, and then that most recent outing, he went for 4. Obviously, no David Montgomery, so 2 of those would have probably been his. 2 might have been Montgomery's, but the matchup soft, 23rd in touchdowns allowed to running backs. So I'm just going to go fantasy score. I think that he can get this done, even if he only goes for like 1 touchdown. I feel great about him. He's in the zone, and I don't think that they're going to overdo it with Montgomery's usage his first week back. So I'm feeling great about Gibbs. Full point PPR, he's probably good. Let's real quick before we move on, let's see what he's been doing receptions wise. He's probably good for at least 3 receptions. Yeah, so 5 straight games with 4 or more receptions. For fantasy score, that's a full point for every catch. So, I mean, give me the fantasy score at 19. I know that's kind of high, but I feel great about him just stacking up the points in this matchup. Let's take a look at Daily Grind. I had a feeling this might be a little high for them to like it, because there's going to be other platforms giving it to you at a different price. So they don't like the 19 fantasy score. So if you don't want to take it, just fade it. You don't have to take everything I'm taking. They have it favored to the under at a 52.2% odds to hit the under. They love his longest rush over 19.5. I think that looks great too. Maybe take that if you don't want to take the fantasy score, but I still prefer the fantasy score. 52.92% odds to hit the over minus 132 on that longest rush. And they also like his longest reception over 12.5. 51.41% odds to hit the over. These can be good options to take sometimes, because one big play and you're cashed. You don't have to wait for him to stack up all the fantasy score. But I still prefer the fantasy score. I just think it's a little bit safer. But he's going to hit one of those. He's going to hit the longest rush or the longest reception, if not both. So they like his receiving yards to go over as well. And yeah, that's about it for that play. All right, let's move on to Terry McLaurin here. Oh man, I'm so happy to see McLaurin. Like, all of the waiting has paid off. He has an awesome team. First year with the new head coach. Cliff Kingsbury comes in, Jaden Daniels comes in, and he's been loyal to this team, and now he gets to be a part of a really exciting team going into the future, looking bright, young squad. And yeah, he's cleared this fantasy score 8 out of his last 10 games. My gosh, like he's getting the receptions, he's getting the receiving yards, he's getting into the end zone. Take a look at the receptions here. All right. So 4 out of his last 5 games, and I'm sorry, 3 out of his last 5, he's gone for 7 or more. This game against Philly, he went for 5. And then the matchup, 20th in receptions allowed. We know that Detroit is a pass funnel defense, so they're tough to run against, but they're pretty soft on allowing passing yards. And yeah, if you take a look here, receptions to wide receivers, 31st. So they allow a lot of receptions to the wide receivers. And then let's take a look at the receiving yards. Sometimes with McLaurin, he's more of a guy I would look at the receiving yards over the receptions. But lately they've been peppering him more and more, getting him more involved. But 32nd in receiving yards allowed. So it's soft for receiving yards, soft for receptions. And then let's take a look at how he's been doing with getting in the end zone. So he has 5 touchdowns in the last 5 games. 4 out of his last 5, he's gone for at least 1. Just didn't get 1 against Atlanta. And Detroit actually statistically has been tough to get in the end zone for wide receivers. 2nd in touchdowns allowed, and then overall 5th. So they do tighten things up once they're in the end zone. But I still think that the upside here at just 14.5 for the fantasy score, I don't need him to get in the end zone to get this done. Let's take a look at the last 10 here. Oh, we already looked at that. Yeah, 8 out of his last 10. Let's look at the touchdowns on that as well. Zoomed out a little bit. Yeah, I mean, good Lord. 7 out of his last 10 games, he's went for a touchdown, and 3 of those he has not double digit, 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, what is that? 10 touchdowns in 10 weeks? Yeah, give me the fantasy score. I'll take it. All right, let's look at daily grind for this play. Fantasy score they think is the best option. 14.5. They've got that at a 51.08% odds to hit the over. And some platforms are up there, 15.3, 15.1, like DraftKings. We're getting it at 14.5 with Prize Picks, and it's full point PPR, so you got to love it. The receptions, they actually like it to go over 5.5. They have it at a 50.66% odds to hit the over, minus 121. And yeah, other than that, I mean, those seem to be the 2 that the optimizer loves the best, but I will absolutely take that fantasy score. I'm going to be looking at his receptions or his receiving yards for the Demon Slip later. We'll see what ends up looking good, but this next one, I'm going with Dyami Brown, the other wide receiver for the Commanders. He's really emerged, and I know this doesn't look great on the last 10, but he's really emerged as one of, he's probably the wide receiver 2 for this offense right now. He's been consistent. This game against Tampa Bay was a softer matchup, but we've got a soft matchup to wide receivers here with the Lions too. But he went for 89 yards. If we take a look here at the receptions, he got 5 targets, 5 receptions, and look at the consistency these past 5 weeks. He's literally like 5-4, 5-4, 5-4 as far as targets go. And other than last week when he went perfect 5 for 5. He's just missing one catch. So 4 of 5, 3 of 4, and so on. So I think that, I love this play specifically at the fantasy score line because he also, he got into the end zone last week. And even though he doesn't get into the end zone super often, he does get targeted there. So he gets high value targets. He ended up pulling that one down. And we know that it's a tough matchup here, but I just think this is low enough to where we don't need him to get in the end zone to cash this fantasy score for us. So with the emergence coming up late for him, I think this is going to be Terry McLaurin, Dyami Brown. You get a little bit of Zacchaeus, catching those passes off to the side and just kind of trying to get first downs. But even with Jameson Crowder, I believe it is, who's back, it really did not affect Dyami Brown's usage. So I'm feeling good about it. 3 out of the last 5. And then this is just such a low fantasy score at 7.5. So I'll be rolling this to finish up the slip. Let's take a look here. So the optimizer likes his receptions over 3 as the best option. 52.05%. Maybe you prefer that. Go with your gut. I'm going fantasy score. They also like the fantasy score to go over 7.5. 50.14% odds to hit the over. And the reason I'm just going to take the fantasy score is because if he gets over 3, obviously he's going to be at least 4, which would be 4 points fantasy. So let's pop over here to receiving yards and take a look here. He's averaging 11.2 yards per reception. And last week against Tampa Bay, he averaged 17.8 yards per reception. So if he gets 4 receptions, he's probably cashing that fantasy score because, that would be like, 50-something yards. More than that. My point is the yards and the receptions combined are going to crush that fantasy score if he gets the 4 receptions. If he keeps this up, even at 11, 4 receptions would be 45 yards, which would be 8.5 fantasy score, which would cash that 7.5. But if he happens to get 3 receptions and he is averaging 15 to 18 yards per reception, he's still going to cash us, even though you're going to be pushing on the receptions. So I love this, the full fantasy score for him. And that's going to wrap up this slip, guys. Once again, if you want to double check it, Jahmyr Gibbs, 19 fantasy score, Terry McLaurin, 14.5 fantasy score. This is almost all fantasy score. Xavier Worthy, 11.5. Jameson Williams, 4 receptions, or the fantasy score if you prefer. Dalton Schultz, 8.5 fantasy score. Dyami Brown, 7.5 fantasy score. Don't forget, I'm going to be dropping a demon slip for this slate later on, so make sure you're subscribed. And if you have the notifications on, it should tell you when I drop the demon slip into the community section. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate the support. Good luck on this slip. Don't forget to like the video on the way out, and we'll catch you in the next video.